Hey everybody, today I've come down to Miami to take a look at the lightest and one of the most affordable EVs you can buy in the US today. This is the all-new 2024 Fiat 500e. Let's take a look. Before we get stuck into this 500e, let's talk about what I know is going to be down there in the comments section below. This is not trying to be a high-volume EV. It was never intended to be from the beginning. It's intended to be a style-forward electric vehicle for someone that lives in an urban or a suburban area and commutes, wants something that's easier to park and less resource-intense than the average new EV. Obviously, also, someone that wants something less expensive than the average new EV in America, because this is $21,000 less starting than the average new EV for 2024. With a curb weight under 3,000 pounds, it also uses less raw materials. It has a significantly smaller battery than the average new EV that's been launched over the last few years, and that all leads to this being less expensive, better for the environment, etc. But clearly also definitely small. So if you're looking for something with a big roomy back seat, it's not going to be this. On the other hand, if you're looking for one of the most stylish, I might even say one of the cutest EVs available, especially in North America, you might want to take a look at the 500. I appreciate the fact that they've been so dedicated to the 500's classic design elements over the generations, even though clearly this is significantly bigger than the first ever Cinquecento when it rolled out. Now, versus the last generation 500e, this has become wider and longer and taller, etc., but also it rides on a completely unique platform. This was designed from the ground up to be electric only. Starting with the design, we have the homage to the round headlight designs that we've seen in the past. This upper bar, the sort of eyebrow section, is actually on the vehicle's hood. Then we get the full LED lights below, DRLs and turn signals in that round area, and just a little bit of cooling at the bottom. Versus the outgoing 500e, this generation is about 2 inches longer, 2 inches wider, and about an inch taller as well. Most of that stretch goes to the interior, where we certainly find a roomier cabin than we found in the past, but some of it does get consumed by the differing safety systems that we find in a more modern vehicle like this. So a little bit more is taken up by the bumpers front and rear. Now, because this is so light, they were able to put tiny tires and wheels on it. These are 205/45 R17s. So another reason you might want to take a look at something like the 500e is that logically maintenance costs are going to be lower. It's lighter, so it's not going to wear tires out as quickly. And when you do need to replace those tires, 205 with tires are going to be a lot less expensive than what we find in the average new EV in North America. And you can get summer tires right from the factory if you're interested. Remember that the mission of the 500e is not to be the least expensive EV in North America. It's designed to be a style-forward EV. So we find touches like these little arrow fins on the front that have a little Italian flag inside, electric door handles where the release is up there, and lots of Easter egg-like touches like the Made in Torino icons in the taillights, of course the skyline, which includes the cathedral over here on this side. And you'll notice that the Fiat logo no longer has a chrome ring around it like we've seen in the past. This is of course the 500e Red edition, so the Fiat logo is red. But there are still some economical touches, like the drum brakes that we find in the back. Those are actually sensible in an EV because they provide less friction than the disc brakes up front when the brakes are not engaged. Out back, it has that classic 500e proportion. It is a little bit less cargo practical than something like a Fiat Panda, of course, as a result, but it really just adds to the elegance and the sort of cute, chic design that we find in the 500. Again, big reason to get this is for that design, not because it has a huge cargo area in the back, because of course it doesn't. But there is enough room back here to put luggage for a weekend away for two, and if you really needed to, you could put two friends in the back seats. Just keep in mind that you'd get a bit more cargo room, of course, if those rear seats were folded. One of the most interesting or amusing touches is this itty-bitty little cargo cover here. Check out this tonneau cover. It's maybe about 6 inches deep or something like that. I'm actually surprised we have one there at all. Now let's talk about what powers the new 500. We have a new 117 horsepower electric motor under the front of the vehicle. In a car this size, that makes a lot of sense for a few reasons. The first one is we get more regenerative braking potential in a front motor design like this, improved stability in ice, snow, wet weather, etc., and better packaging efficiency, because putting this motor in the back while still having a crash structure up front would have meant the vehicle would have had to have been bigger, or it would have had a much smaller cargo area in the back. So this does make a lot of sense for a vehicle this size. I am, however, surprised that Fiat doesn't give us a teeny tiny little storage area under here, just somewhere to put your NACS adapter or something like that, because they did bother to give us hood struts. This is not a prop rod hood, which is kind of surprising. The battery is skateboard style under the vehicle because this rides on the new STLA City platform, which was designed from the ground up to be an electric platform. The battery itself is nearly double the size of the outgoing 500e, 42 kilowatt hours in this model, and it has a surprisingly quick AC charger on board. It's an 11 kilowatt AC charger that can get this battery from 0 to completely full in under 6 hours, and more importantly, will recover the average daily commute in maybe less than an hour. So it's a pretty swift AC charger. If you want to DC fast charge, you technically can, and you could get about 100 miles of range in 35 minutes. Remember that DC charge speeds are largely a function of the number of cells in the battery pack. So this battery is pretty small, therefore it's not going to charge terribly quickly. 85 kilowatts is its maximum charge rate. That is on the slow side for a modern EV, but this battery is significantly smaller than most. That's why we get about 150 miles of range, of course. But again, if we're talking about resource utilization, this uses less than half of the amount of raw materials that something like a Kia EV9 would use. As you'd expect in a true city car, charging happens back here on the rear passenger quarter panel. That makes a lot of sense for urban charging where you're going to be charging curbside. Of course, we have the J1772 connector up there, CCS connector right there for DC fast charging. Stellantis has signed up for the J3400 charge connector in North America, but we don't know when or if that will come to the 500e. To check out the interior, I've hopped in one of the top-end trims that they've brought along. I'll show you this interior, then we'll talk about the differences between this and the model I spent most of my time in today. One of the things that is the same is the seat design. This is still a manual driver's seat and manual front passenger seat. No power seats available here, although this one is wrapped in leather upholstery, which you're going to see in just a moment. I moved into this interior because the lighter upholstery is just a little bit easier to film, especially in the direct sunlight today. We also get a two-tone steering wheel in this model, but all versions are going to have a manual tilt telescopic wheel with a pretty decent range of motion, and all models are also going to get gobs and gobs of headroom because of how upright the form of the 500 is. The optimization of this platform specifically for an EV really helped in that, and then of course we don't have a sunroof here, so that means I get about 2.5 to 3 inches of headroom or so with the seat bottom cushion all the way down. They also give us quite a lot of legroom, so if you're a taller person, this is actually one of the small vehicles that might fit you. How's the back seat? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's go ahead and check that out. I have left it adjusted for me at 6 feet tall. I will see if I can move it or get into the back without moving it. Let's see here, because I want to make sure that it goes in exactly the same place as it did before. Ooh, look at that. I can hop in the back. I can, in fact, close the door, and yep, I can pull the seat back into the exact same position. But you'll notice headroom is certainly a bit limited back here. There's really no way to be overly comfortable as an adult, but kids should be just fine back here. And actually, adults for, work trip to lunch or something like that would be just fine. The seat bottom cushion is a little higher off the ground than I had expected, and we find a cup holder back here. One thing you won't find, however, is a fifth seat belt. That's because this is a 4-seat vehicle only. The rear seats feature latch anchors for both seating positions, but that does appear to be a little bit optimistic. I could see maybe a booster seat back here or possibly a small forward-facing seat. I really don't see any way that you'd be able to put a rear-facing child seat, especially behind an adult up front. Most of this interior is the same regardless of the trim you're looking at. At the moment, none of the models will feature a moonroof, but that does give us extra headroom up front, and again, it's pretty spacious. From this angle, you can actually see just barely how the roof line actually pops up right here for the driver and front passenger's head area. I do kind of wonder if that is maybe in preparation for a potential sunroof in the future. Moving down here, you can notice fixed height shoulder belts. We get adjustable headrests for the driver and front passenger and some eccentric embroidery work here. The 500 logo right there in the middle of that seat. And then the pattern on the seat, whether we're talking about the fabric seats or the leather seats, is Fiat spelled out. So Fiat, 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 Fiat. And that's both for the front seats and for the rear seats back there. You'll notice that one cup holder right back there between those two rear seats. The rear seats are 50-50 folding. Moving up to the front doors, we find lots of hard plastics. And that is sort of the one thing that did surprise me a little bit, because for this price range, when we're talking about the $37,000 top-end trim, you will find slightly more premium materials in some EVs. And I have to caution that because there aren't very many EVs down in this price category at the moment, and very, very few, essentially none in this size category. The entire upper section of the door, that's made from a hard plastic. We then have soft touch materials, whether that's fabric or the imitation leather insert that we find in this model. It looks like the seats are leather, but these armrest inserts are imitation leather to help improve durability. This vehicle has electric door releases. That's the electric release button for the door. That's the door grab handle. And then that lever right down there in that bottle holder, that's the emergency release if there was something to go wrong with the electrical system in the vehicle. Moving up to the dashboard, we find one of the differences between the trims. Instead of the exterior color-matched dash insert, which you're going to see in a bit, we get this very textured soft touch insert. It's kind of like a basket weave pattern, something like that. We then find sort of a satin chrome strip that runs across the dash, and then up here we find hard plastics, just like we find hard plastics lower on the dash. There's that sort of, I don't know, metallic, satin chrome, whatever you want to call that trim strip right there. You can see decently sized air vents integrated into this bar that runs across the dashboard. Hard plastics again lower on the dash. We have a really big glove box right here. This is sort of a combination bin and slot style compartment. You'd have no problem fitting large tablet computers inside. Now, speaking of large displays, we certainly have a big one up here in the center console. This screen features the latest Uconnect software, also featured in other Dodge, Ram, and Chrysler vehicles in North America. The interface is pretty easy to understand. We get almost full screen smartphone integration. You can see it's the very horizontal theme right there. Up here is where we find controls for things like the heated seats. There's also a button to take us over to the widget menu, so you can see those different widgets that are integrated into the vehicle. Then we have some direct access options on this side, like a home screen with our EV information, mapping information there, and you can pop these widgets out and rearrange them on the screen. There's also a readout for the climate control system. You'll notice that some of the responses could be a little bit snappier here and there, although I do like the fact that the nav system is pretty responsive and CarPlay is pretty easy to use. This does support wireless or wired CarPlay, your choice. If I go over here to the vehicle screen, you'll notice that if I click on the electric vehicle option, this is perhaps the slowest loading option. It does seem to be pretty reliable, but it does take a little bit to load, as we've seen in some other Chrysler, Dodge, Ram, and Jeep vehicles. Lots of different options to select there, and you'll really notice the quick charging on this model. And that 3 hours and 5 minutes, that may not sound quick to some, but that's all the way to 100%. And usually batteries charge relatively slowly from 95 up to 100. Moving down the dashboard, we have two more large air vents right there. We have the engine start-stop button over here. Again, more of that trim right there. And we have a large wireless charging mat. You'd have no problem fitting the larger smartphones in there. And what I really like is it doesn't seem to have a problem charging the phone in various orientations or through thicker cases like this one. There's another little Easter egg in here. If I remove the phone and then try and pry out this mat, this is another one of the Skyline sort of icons, I guess you could say. That's from Torino, where the vehicle is manufactured. And I do love the fact that that rubber mat's easy to pull out and easy to clean. We have one USB port for interfacing with the system, physical controls for the climate control system right there. Then moving down the dashboard, you can see where I accidentally dropped my phone right there. We do have a little bit of a hump between the front footwells, but not too much of one. This is actually a vent for the heater when it's in the floor mode. We then find the one cup holder up front. I am surprised that it's just one cup holder. It's actually pretty large and easy to use. It deploys from that center console right like that, but it is the only one in the front. Moving back from that, we have the drive mode toggle. This allows us to choose between normal, range, and Sherpa mode. Yes, you did hear that right, Sherpa mode. Over here we have the power and volume toggle for the infotainment system, electric parking brake, and then we have some other USB charge-only ports. Those will not interface with the system. Then there's a 12-volt power port, and I guess an area where you could put other drinks. I would not be surprised if we saw some aftermarket snap-in drink holders, because this area might be a little bit more usable for drinks. Well, actually, I should show you the key. We have a new Fiat key. I think this is certainly more attractive than the outgoing one. It has kind of a round design, says 500 on the back, lock, unlock there, button for the hatch, and of course the horn honk button right there. Then moving back from that, we have a padded center armrest in all models that opens to reveal a relatively small storage cubby right there, but again, just that one cup holder up front. Now moving on over to the driver's side, you can see that the round theme continues, so we find a definite hump in the dashboard with that same texture running right there over the top. Again, hard plastics on that upper section of the dash. I really like the style of this. I think they did a good job on the style, but I would have liked to have seen some slightly more premium materials in some areas, bearing in mind that the top end price does get a little bit higher than some other options. Now over here on this full LCD instrument cluster, it is a little bit smaller than some, but I appreciate the fact that it's a full LCD. It's pretty configurable. There are a few different looks and themes that you can choose from. You can also roll through your trip computer information, your driver assist screens, vehicle information, and a moving map display powered by the vehicle's mapping system. Now if I pull out from there, you'll find this two-tone flat bottom steering wheel that we have in this particular model. As we see in other Stellantis vehicles, there are also some buttons on the back of the steering wheel. So over here we have volume up, down, and on the other side we have track forward, backward mode, etc. These buttons relate to that multifunction LCD, also voice command and phone buttons over there. And on this side, we have the buttons for the optional adaptive cruise control system. In the model that we're looking at here, we have adaptive cruise control, but in the model I was able to spend most of my day in, we just had regular cruise control. Let me know what you think of the steering wheel design. I'm actually kind of a fan of this recent trend towards two-spoke wheels where the spokes are right across the side. I think it's an attractive look and it's pretty easy to deal with. It also lets you hold the steering wheel right there at the bottom if you want to be a little bit lazier out on the open highway. Moving from the steering wheel back to the center console, I forgot to mention the shift buttons. This is a push button style shifter, so park, reverse, neutral, drive right there, just as you'd expect, and the vehicle will automatically return to park when you turn the car off. What's the interior look like in the red model you saw earlier? Well, it has a red dashboard trim section rather than that textured soft touch material there, so that is a hard plastic, body color matched. We then have the same screen right in the middle of everything, obviously wireless CarPlay right there, and we have essentially the same full LCD instrument cluster on the driver's side. Aside from that, the only other major change is obviously that we don't get leather upholstery. We still have Fiat embossed on the fabric upholstery, we have that 500C red logo right there, and we still have contrasting piping, but this is going to breathe a little bit more easily than the leather seats would. All right, let's get the 500e out on the road. Clearly, the first thing you're going to notice is, of course, the 117 horsepower electric motor. According to Fiat, this should go 0 to 60 in 8.5 seconds. Now, if you engage the Sherpa mode, which is basically their range extending mode, the first thing you're going to notice is the climate control turns off. The second thing you're going to notice is that we actually get less than 80 horsepower out of the electric motor. But honestly, it is surprisingly peppy still, even with that artificial power limit. It's also going to limit your maximum speed to 50 miles an hour. But of course, you can exceed both of those if you press the pedal all the way down. There's a kick down, and then you can actually exceed the speed limit and the power output capability of the motor in order to get, of course, faster acceleration. As far as the stopping distance goes, I haven't been able to test that out here in Miami just yet, but I would expect this is probably going to be right around 110 or 115 feet. It's probably going to be on the short side for an electric vehicle simply because of the curb weight. Also, remember, you can get summer tires in this from the factory. They're not the biggest summer tire, of course, but we're talking about something that's actually lighter than a decent number of Honda Civics out there. So this is a pretty light electric vehicle. And all that is just going to improve the driving dynamics, the acceleration times, the stopping distances, etc. Now let's dive deeper into the front electric motor design. This is not just about packaging efficiency, which again is better, but also about regenerative braking potential. So this has the ability to get more power back in the battery, especially in an urban environment like this, than it would if it had an electric motor in the back. And that's doubly important if you live in an area with inclement weather. So if you live in an area that gets a lot of rain or snow or ice, etc., you really want the electric motor on the front axle. You'll notice that if you're driving a rear-wheel drive EV in ice or a snowy road situation, that it actually has to dial back the regenerative braking on the rear axle or turn it off completely in order to help improve vehicle stability. Simple physics also says that if you're stopping aggressively, you get a weight transfer effectively to the front axle, and that's why you want the regenerative braking happening up there. That's the reason that front brakes in pretty much every vehicle out there are bigger on the front than they are in the back. That's also part of how Fiat can get away with drum brakes in the rear. But there's another thing with the drum brakes in the back. When drum brakes release, the pad actually pulls away from the friction surface, and that means that you don't get that little bit of drag that you get in a disc brake just by their very design. Of course, we get a little bit of drag on the front, but because the front brakes are doing the majority of the braking, that's where you are willing to trade off that for the extra cooling capability and the extra braking capability. This is exactly why we find this same sort of arrangement in the Volkswagen ID.4 for the exact same reasons. As far as ride quality goes, we've basically been driving this in circles around Miami, and as far as an urban vehicle goes, it's about what you'd expect. The suspension is a little on the firm side for some small cars in North America, certainly versus something like a Honda HR-V. This is going to be a little bit more firmly sprung. And remember, the wheelbase is definitely on the short side. Because of the short wheelbase, there are times where you'll feel a little bit like a bobblehead inside the car just because of the amount of time you get between the front suspension encountering something and the rear suspension encountering something, but I don't think that's the worst thing. And you will certainly notice that in something like the average Mini Cooper. And remember, this is actually lighter than some of the more recent Mini versions that we find in North America, simply because of its size and the fact that, again, we have that really small battery pack. That obviously is going to help out the handling ability. Unfortunately, we haven't really been able to test that out here because this is the exact kind of thing that we've been driving around in for about an hour or so today. Hopefully I'll be able to get one of these at home so we can test it on our usual test surfaces and we can really find out what the suspension is up to. I would say it's really well sorted, both front and rear. Broken pavement doesn't seem to upset it. And I do like the steering feel. It has a nice engaging feel to it. There's not a lot of steering feedback coming from the front axle, but honestly there isn't in most vehicles in North America today. Ride quality is, again, pretty decent, and cabin noise is pretty decent as well. You can thank the relatively narrow tires for that. Just 2 of 5 with tires means that there's just less road noise being generated by the tires to be transmitted into the cabin. Again, no official numbers there. Now, on the efficiency side of things, before we stopped to film and just had the air conditioning running since it's getting hot outside, we were averaging 4.1 miles per kilowatt hour. I actually find that pretty impressive, even giving the city-heavy drive cycle that we've been engaged in. Obviously, the city numbers in a modern EV are going to be the highest numbers available, but this still stacks up pretty well against most modern EVs, even the ultra-efficient set. Obviously, for our final efficiency scores and our real-world range score, you're going to have to wait until we can get one of these at home to run it through our usual battery of tests, but I would say it performs just about as you'd expect it to. Keep in mind that highway fuel efficiency is largely a function of aerodynamics, and when we're talking about a vehicle like this, with this profile, you might be surprised to hear that something that's considerably larger and heavier may actually be more efficient out on the open highway, especially at higher speeds. So I would not be surprised at all if something like a rear-wheel drive Model 3 or an Ioniq 6 or EV6 actually was more efficient at 70 miles an hour than this 500e, simply because of the aerodynamic realities of driving 70 miles an hour. But that's not exactly what the 500e is about. And again, keep in mind that DC fast charge time. If you're looking for a highway cruiser, you're going to be spending 35 minutes every approximately 100 miles in this to charge, because that's what it's going to take to get you from 10% to 80%. And if you wanted to go completely full and get another about 145 or 150 miles of range out of the vehicle, it's going to take you at least twice that long. So we're talking about relatively lengthy DC fast charge times, and you will certainly get more miles out of a 30-minute charge in a lot of the other options in North America. So this is the kind of occasional road trip vehicle if you bought it for city driving and then occasionally you needed to go from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Yes, you could do it, but just keep in mind it's going to take you a lot longer in this than in some of the competition. If you're looking to get your hands on the new 500e, these are essentially on sale now, although some deliveries have been a little bit delayed due to the bridge collapse back east. So certainly keep that in mind if you absolutely want to have one right away. Pricing is going to range from around $34,000 including destination for something like this 500 Red, on up to about $37,000 for a fully loaded model like the ones right behind me. There's not too much of a difference between the models. You are going to get the leather upholstery, you're going to get the adaptive cruise control system, some expanded autonomous emergency braking features, etc. But honestly, the vehicles look very, very similar. Aside from the chrome stripes right here and the 500 logo, it's pretty difficult to tell the two apart on the outside. Now, as far as competition goes, that's tricky because there really isn't anything like the 500e currently in the United States. And that's why Fiat is really honest and upfront saying this is a particular vehicle for someone that wants a really style-forward urban EV. They're really after something that's small, easy to park, uses fewer resources, has a smaller battery pack, etc. Somebody that is interested in that specific kind of EV. If you're looking for a long-range road trip EV or you're just looking for a deal, then this is not going to be the best choice. Now bear in mind that for this model year, the Chevy Bolt and the Bolt EUV are gone. Theoretically, they may be replaced by the Chevy Equinox at some point in time, but we don't know the complete pricing structure of the Equinox just yet. It's going to start around $35,000 or so, so certainly within the price range of something like this, but it's going to be a very different vehicle. If you are concerned about easy city parking, this is going to be a significantly better option. I also certainly think it's a bit more attractive in a very different sort of way from what we find in that vehicle. A more interesting competitor, I think, in my mind, would be the upcoming Volvo EX30, because that is particularly inexpensive. It's also very, very quick, 0 to 60, and it's going to have a pretty long range. but it's not going to be built in Europe like this is. It's going to be built in China, and that has its own particular set of geopolitical issues at the moment. Not everybody is a big fan of buying an EV built in China, but it seems like a lot fewer people would have a problem buying an EV built in Italy, at least for the moment. Bear in mind that neither one is going to qualify for the federal tax credit because it's not built in the United States. But something like the upcoming Chevy Equinox EV, that probably will qualify for the federal tax credit. And a $7,500 tax credit on something that's around $35,000 is going to be a pretty big deal. This is going to qualify for some lease incentive, at least at the moment. And it appears that depending on where you are in the United States, you could get about $3,750 credit on your lease, bringing this down to potentially around $350 to $400 a month. That's going to be very region dependent because some areas of the US are currently advertising about $500 a month leases. It's pretty obvious that with the new 500e, Fiat is not trying to make this the cheapest EV in America. And you know, I'm actually okay with that because I think that it's worth paying a little bit of a premium for something that's perhaps a little bit more style forward. And you do get a few choices as far as the design. Again, this is the front end on the non-red model. So we have 500 with the more traditional 500 logo right there, some little chrome stripes. And there are probably going to be special edition versions of the 500 in the future. That's one of the reasons you want to get this over something like a Leaf. You will have to pay a bit more, but it'll be more style forward. There's probably going to be some more customization coming in the future. And you can expect that the aftermarket is going to have more things to do with this aftermarket, more accessories on the inside, more style bits, etc. But you will have to be prepared to have something smaller as well. Be sure and sound off with your thoughts down there in the comments section below. For me, I think this certainly has a place in the EV landscape. I'm not entirely clear whether it would be for me, but the one thing that might change my mind would be a convertible version of the 500, or at least an open-top version like we found in the last generation 500C. Having a fabric rolling top or even a large moonroof that you could manually remove even if it wasn't powered, that's a feature I would absolutely love to see in the Fiat 500 because that would make this truly unique, and it would turn it from just a fun commuter car in urban environs to the kind of car you would want to take out a little bit longer on the weekend. Maybe a trip to Napa or something like that from the Bay Area. You could still do that with the range that we find on this model, especially if you had destination charging. I think that would just add an extra level of fun to the model. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section below. Hit me up down there in the comment section. Let me know what you would cross-shop against this. Find me over at Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those other social places. We'll see all of you next week.